Pig feed ingredients. What are they putting into pig feed these days? Did you know that almost all pig feeds that you can go and buy somewhere are almost identical? There's not a whole lot of variation between them. Let me show you. The primary ingredient in all pig feeds here in the U.S. is corn. Now that makes up about 80% of your standard pig feed. It's usually about 80%, it can be plus or minus, about 80% corn for your standard grower hog feed. The next ingredient is going to be soy. Now, depending on the type of soy that you're using, if you're doing like a roasted soybean or a soybean meal, there's a big difference there. And even the different types of soybeans that are grown, there is some difference in how much protein is in them, which means the ratios will be a little bit different. But generally we have about 80% corn, 20% soy. Now that's the standard mix ratio. That's the base. And after you get the base, you add to it a mineral blend, usually called a premix. I don't know why. It's a mineral powder. It's just a bunch of crude ingredients ground together, things like green sand, crushed oyster shells, or even crushed egg shells. They might add just an assortment of mineral powders together, and that's your mineral blend or your premix. So we have your 80-20 corn, and then your premix or your minerals. Now your minerals are usually about 40 pounds or so per 1,000 pounds of feed mixed. So once you get your 80-20 corn and soy, you would add to that 40 pounds per 1,000 pounds of that premix, of that mixed base feed. So that's your standard pig feed, is corn, soy, and minerals. The soy that they use around here is almost all a processed soybean meal, which means it has had all the oils extracted out of it. They press it, extract the soybean oil out of it, so you have a fairly dry meal to deal with. The problem with that is it's got all the fat removed. Pigs do well with a little fat. So another ingredient that's usually added, again in very small amounts, but it's usually added, is a little bit of fat. And it's funny, one of the primary fats that I see listed on the feed ingredients tabs when I read through them is something that's known as white grease. White grease is actually leftover lard from the processing and slaughter. So a lot of pig feed actually has a little bit of pig fat mixed in with it, which is kind of strange. I guess it works, but now you know. So they'll add to that oil or fat of some kind, because pigs need some kind of oil or fat. They don't really need a lot of it, not too much. I go a little bit easy on it for my animals. So that's your main mix here. You have an 80-20 corn and soy that's mixed together as your base feed. Your mineral blend, which is added in small amounts, usually around 40 pounds of mineral per 1,000 pounds of pig feed, of this base blend. Then you'd go and get your oil, your fat, and this honestly is sometimes added at just like a 2 or 3%. Sometimes it's a little more like a 5% overall. So if I had, say, 1,000 plus 40 pounds, so I had 1,000 pounds corn and soy blended together, 40 pounds of my minerals, I would add to that 5% of some kind of a fat. So corn, soy, minerals, and oil or fat, both the mineral and oil or fat are approximately the same level. Approximately the same level of inclusion. Now, why corn and soy being everything? Honestly, I don't want to get too much into conspiracy, but that's fun. It goes back to, well, long-term corn has always been, I guess, it's always been the primary feed ingredient grown in the U.S. as far as grain, because that's what the natives grew. So when the settlers came over here, they started growing corn. It just became the thing. Eventually, they learned how to grow corn at a very high fertility highly productive rate, and they could outgrow other grains with corn. So that's why. But then also, back in the 70s, with some restructuring of the economy deals that were struck, well, all kinds of weird things with trade happened, and corn, through weird trading cruds, became the king crop of most of the world in trade. So that's why it's still government subsidized. It's weird. And soy, actually kind of the same thing. Soy was kind of part of that same sort of trade deal, but it's a good protein. I don't like some of the problems associated with using soy, some of the hormonal changes that can occur in the animals from using soy. But your corn and your soy is usually like between 30 and 40% protein, depending on how it's treated. The stuff I buy is about 45 or 46% protein once it's dried and roasted. Now, some of the stuff I grow out here, some of my specialty corns that I've been growing and selling a little bit locally, feeding to our animals, those are more like a 10 to a 12% protein. I love that. Even the lysine content is higher, which is awesome, and they ferment really well. But most of your corn is a very low starch corn, especially the kind that they're breeding these days. It's easily digestible. Very, very easy. Did I say low starch? It's a very heavy starch corn. It's easily digestible, good energy. They have to add protein to it, so your corn and soy. That's the primary pairing together. Now, it wasn't always that way where it was corn and soy. Soy really only became a big thing really after the 60s, kind of into the 70s and later. Before then, if you wanted protein, you used different kind of meat byproducts from butcher shops, or you would use usually some kind of a pea or sunflower seeds, or just other types of beans. Soy wasn't really a thing that much until it got more and more popular for soybean oil. So alternatives to these, if you're not really into corn and soy, if you want to grow some of your own or buy your own ingredients and blend your own, we grow our own and we buy our own raw grains locally here from the farmers, and we'll blend them up and ferment them for a feed. Alternatives, if you don't want corn, the more common one is barley besides corn. If you don't want corn, barley is a great option. I like the alternative corns, more like some of the different flint corns, different types of Indian corns like Wade's Giant Indian. And I like early pink popcorn actually because of the way it grows and being a little early for a flint, for a high protein corn. And Atomic Orange, just because it's a higher protein and it's also much earlier than anything else we can grow, so it does really good in our climate, and I can still get in 2 cover crops around growing that just fine and dandy. But if you don't want to do corn and soy, instead of your corn, think of any other grain. Really, wheat is actually a great option. Wheat can be used at about a pound for pound replacement of corn in any of these mixes. It's a little less energy, but you know, if you want to use it, you can, and it will work. Barley and wheat. Oats. I use a lot of oats. People say don't use oats because they're too fibrous. Well, once I ferment them, that fibrous hull breaks down. It's great for the pigs. I use a lot of oats in our blendings here. Soy. If you don't want to use soy, a great option that I like is sunflower seed because it grows well anywhere across the continental United States. I can grow some type of a sunflower, harvest the seed, and they're very high protein. If you wanted to plant a good quality seed, like some of the black oil sunflower seed, that's basically an equivalent pound for pound, yield per acre, protein per acre as the soy, as you can get from any of the commercial soy. Plus, that sunflower seed, if you grow it yourself or if you buy a whole sunflower seed, it's got all the fats and oils in it that you need in any pig mix. If you add it in at about that 20-ish% rate with a grain. So, minerals, if you don't want to buy mineral. So, your minerals. I do buy a mineral blend. Right here. I got a bag of mineral blend here. I just bought 20 pounds at a time from the feed mill in town. I don't always use it. It's handy. It can work. If you feed a lot of... Ooh, my coffee's boiling. I got to get to it. Sorry about that. I didn't want it to over-percolate. Now, where was I? Minerals. If you're having your pigs where they're not eating just straight up grains, corn, soy, oats, wheat, barley, whatever, then maybe you don't need minerals or you don't need them as much at all. If they're getting a lot of your kitchen scraps, if they're getting throw out foods, if they're in a pasture setting where they're getting a lot of green stuff, we cut and carry a lot of green crops, a lot of we'll do comfrey, various grasses, all the wild perennials and tree leaves. We'll cut and carry that over to the pigs, and they get all the leftover produce from the farmers market that we run. That's their vitamin and mineral supplements. But in the winter, we don't have that, so I do use a vitamin mix, a premix mineral supplement, and I add some vitamins to that, just stuff I can go buy at the local feed store. And that adds what they need in the winter when we don't have the green fodder available. So, feed ingredients. Some kind of a grain. Pigs need starch as carbohydrates as their primary feed source. Carbohydrates is what they need. Some people have even done it with acorns and various nuts as the primary feed ingredient. Can be a little dicey, but if you know what you're doing, it can work. You need starch, usually grain. You need a protein, usually some kind of a bean or pea or sunflower seed. You might want to add some minerals to that, and then some kind of an oil or fat if you're not using a seed in here already that's full of oil, like the sunflower seed would be, or any kind of a raw or even roasted bean is going to have a decent bit of oil in it. So that's your pig feed ingredients. Don't forget to check out the new Facebook group, community group, Homestead Know-How. I'm there all the time if you want to talk or ask any kind of questions. Come on over, share what you got going on, or ask any questions. I got coffee and chores, so I'll catch you later. Bye now.